Hi there, welcome to Women in Golf. Just to let you know, today we are speaking to Gemma Hunter, who is the Head of Handicapping and Course Rating at England Golf. We're following up after having a great session with Gemma previously, talking about the World Handicap System. Recently, we asked our followers on social media to send in their questions so that Gemma could help us out as we sort of move forward into the season. So I think probably before we get on to those questions, it'd be good just to know, how's it going? How's the World Handicap System been received so far?
Overall, I think we can say it's been okay. It's been quite a positive experience. I think we've been in the very unique position to everybody else around the world that we've probably had two launches. We had the 2nd of November launch, which was us transitioning into WHS, and then obviously COVID and everything else happening. People didn't really use the system, so nobody really got stuck into it until we came back to golf at the end of March. So we sort of saw that end of March return to golf as being a second launch, as a second, the first real time people have gone out and actually used the system. So as with anything that's new, people have got to find their feet. They've got to take a little bit of time to get used to it. And we're starting to see that happen now. Golfers are back at golf clubs, so golf clubs are educated a little bit more about the system as well to golfers. But yeah, it's as with any new system, it's not been without its teething problems, and we've had a large volume of emails coming into England Golf. So prior to Christmas, we received 45,000 emails between the 16th of October and Christmas.
Wow.
Which was just crazy. And then we started with a new process when we relaunched, obviously when we came back to golf in March, and we've been averaging around about 1,000 emails per week into England Golf. So yes, the volume of questions has come down, but actually the questions are now becoming a little bit more technical, and they're not so much the questions of how does the system work and what does this number mean. It's more like, well, can you explain why you've got this answer and how this has been calculated? So we're getting to a little bit more technical detail now, which is good, because that means it's increasing people's understanding. So like I said, not been without its hitches and its glitches all the way through, but it's what it is. We'll continue to develop. Other countries around the world are saying it takes up to 12 months for it to really settle in and for people to get used to it. So we could say that could be November, or we could say actually by the time we come around to the start of next season, everybody will be more comfortable with it and will be able to move forward. So it's all right. I've not gone grey yet. Well, I've had to hide it with blonde, but yeah.
I'm not surprised with that many. 45,000, my goodness me, that is unbelievable. So I think we'll just try and keep this brief and to the point. But as I say, I asked our followers from Women Golf any of their questions. Now, I think the first one was asked in some way, shape or form quite a few times. And I'll go with the one I had here from Christine. And she said, she thinks that the overall system is pretty fair. But I think the 95% for playing handicap isn't right. Should have handicap indexed and course handicap, forget the playing handicap for straight play. So putting that into a question, so what would you say? Would you be able to explain the reasoning behind that 95% on straight play? Would you be able to explain that to us?
Yeah, sure. So actually it's probably our biggest question. Outside of what's my username and what's my password, it is probably the biggest question that we get asked. And the first thing is the 95% is about equity. So it's not so much about sort of trying to penalise anybody for their performance. It's about saying that if you play in a group with a group of players, because of the different abilities of players and the fact that some people might have a really good day and some people have a bad day, based on probability and equity, you have to apply an adjustment to allow people an equal chance of success. So the best example I can give you is if you've got a scratch handicap golfer playing in a competition alongside a player with a 36 handicap, that player is expected to play to scratch. That's what their expected handicap is. But we know that they don't always play to scratch. So we know that sometimes they'll play better and sometimes they'll play worse. But if you think about that elite golfer and that scratch golfer, their good golf is 2 or 3 under. Their bad golf is probably 3 or 4 over. They don't go to the extremes. They don't have a 10 or 12 under, and they don't have very often a 10 or 12 over. So they're relatively sort of like narrow margins that they're playing. Whereas a 36 handicap golfer, while like I said, we expect them to play to 36, we know full well that a 36 handicap player can quite easily shoot 50 over without trying because they've had a bad day. But they could also very, very easily play to 26 and shoot 10 under because they've had a good day. The putts have fallen in the right area. The ball's running a little bit. We know that can happen. So if you build that into a field scenario where you've got a group of players playing against each other, if you've got any higher volume of higher handicap players, they're always more likely to win because they're more likely to score better than a scratch player. So if we want to even that out to give the low handicap golfer an opportunity to win, we're not saying it's making it they're always going to win. To give them more opportunity, we have to provide an adjustment. And it's actually something that's been in the system, in the Kongu system, but it was hidden. It was hidden within the way that we calculated your Kongu handicap. It's been in the USGA system. It's been in the Golf Australia system. It's been in a lot of handicap systems before, and it's what they call bonus for excellence, which is basically an adjustment that basically takes shots off the higher handicap golfer, but doesn't take any off the lower handicap player. So it just helps with equity. Now, before we've hidden it and people say, well, just hide it again, and that's fine, but everybody has a different level of what equity is. The USGA are comfortable with it being 95% for them, whereas Golf Australia think it's more like 93%. There's been some analysis done, and it could actually be that it's more like 91% rather than 95, but 95 was the number that was relatively easy to try and calculate if you wanted to do it in your head. But it was the fact that that's the sort of middle ground for equity. That gives people a chance of success, but not necessarily a chance of winning. So it's equity. It's about making it fair for everybody, really. There's a lot of discussion about it, but it's always been there, and it is the right thing to do, because otherwise your higher handicap golfer are always going to be more successful than your lower handicap player.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think over time as well, that will become more evident, I think, as people play more competitions and see that happening. You mentioned the USGA, and the next one sort of touched on this, and I have to apologise in advance because it does sound like a little bit of an attack on England golf, but I think we'll get there in the end. So it says here, Jill said, England golf differs from USGA. In the USGA and most other countries' golf federations, 95% of handicap allowance for stroke play is only recommended for fields of more than 30 players. England golf has adopted it for all fields. England golf also refused to use course rating to par adjustment. So much for the World Handicap System. England golf has made it all seem unnecessarily complicated. It's a very good system when it's used as it is intended. So I think probably, I mean, there's lots of questions in there, but maybe we could just sort of go again with the 95%. Is that unusual is it an England golf thing that it's applied to only to every field rather than just fields of more than 30? I mean, I don't know. I say I'm not the expert like you are. So yeah.
No, it's fine. I think what the first thing to understand is that England golf haven't made these decisions. It's not an England golf decision. So for GB and I, for Kongu, it's Kongu that made the decision. So all the home unions, England, Ireland, Scotland and Wales, have come together to make decisions that are appropriate for golf within our jurisdiction. And England golf obviously just happens to be where the player plays, and they've probably seen me speaking before and presume it's just England golf, but it is actually GB and I as a whole. And one of the reasons we've done that is when we looked at our data of where equity sits, actually, unless you're playing head to head, you still need equity, because you could have one good player and 29 higher handicap players playing in a field. And if you do that, that low player has got hardly any opportunity of success. So then it's not equitable. So we looked at all our scoring data and went, actually, as Kongu, do we agree that it should be 30% at 30 people, or do we actually say this should be applied to everybody? And we made the decision that it's applied to everybody. If you're playing in a field, irrelevant of what the field size is, you need to build in equity. And we've mandated the allowances to basically make sure people apply it equally across GB&I. Because if we had chose not to do that, then you would have got some golf clubs running it at 100%, some golf clubs running it at 90%, some running it at 95%, and that would have been far more confusing for people. At least this way, it's consistently applied across GB&I. It's 95%, irrelevant of the field size, unless you're playing head-to-head, and that's in like match play. And that's the easiest way to actually get it applied consistently.
That does make a lot more sense. And I think, as you say, if you only play in one of those countries, you don't realise that it's a GB&I thing, not just an England thing. Sort of following on a similar idea with the different home nations. So Wendy said, I'm a member of a course in Scotland and England, 15 miles apart, and the two systems don't talk to one another. So now I have two CDH numbers and at the moment 2 different handicaps. This is being rectified, hopefully. Therefore, it is not a World Handicap System. So I think the question sort of to come from that is that this is maybe potentially some teething problems with regards to having 2 different handicaps. But do you have multiple CGH numbers depending on the country you play in? Is that the case?
So at the moment, it's correct that also you read. I think it was Wendy.
That's Wendy.
They don't actually talk to each other. So they don't at the moment. What we're doing is the USGA and RNA, so WHS as a whole, are working to create what they're calling interoperability. That's a bit of a mouthful on a Tuesday morning, but interoperability. So that basically we will be able to communicate with all other countries. We'll be able to share scores. So if you play in Spain, your score will come back to your English record. It will be able to mean that you could go and look at your handicap in another country as well, and that they would then become one handicap, one system, and everybody's main systems would all talk to each other. In an ideal world, we'd have had this ready for WHS launch. Unfortunately, with the fact that everybody was coming on to WHS at different points on the timeline, and that different countries' technology capabilities are at different levels, it made sense that actually that was stage 2 of WHS. And what we're doing is we're working with Scottish Golf to first of all tie up GB&I. So we're taking some of the workings from the interoperability group, and we're trying to almost trial that in GB&I, and that should start to sort of like happen pretty soon. But yeah, it will do eventually. You will be able to sort of like use your single handicap index, your membership number, wherever you are in the world. But for now, it is a case of if you play outside of England, bring your scorecard back, give that to your golf club. If you play in another country for any period of time, then when you return, bring your last 20 scores that are held in your record. So if you hold a record in Spain and you play out there for 3-4 months of the year, when you come back, bring your last 20 scores from your Spanish record. We can add them into the platform, or your home club can add them in, and we can get your handicaps the same. So really your handicap indexes should be the same because the same scores are being used in both records. But that's up to the player to make sure that those scores for now are added and both records are kept exactly the same.
Okay, that definitely makes sense. I can understand what you mean there. So let's go on to someone who's quite sort of a lower sort of handicap golfer. This is Arlene. She says, I'm off 5.0. I don't like the randomness of it all. I like knowing that if I'd played in my buffer zone, I was safe. If not, it was just as 0.1 up. She goes, this is horrid. No CSS to reflect how hard it was. Played in pouring rain and 25-mile-an-hour winds yesterday and only 7 over my handicap, but penalised just as though it was perfect conditions. So I've got a question here. So the competition scratch score was replaced with the new playing conditions calculation. I hope I got this right. Can you explain what this is and what may have happened in Arlene's case?
Yeah, so you're totally right that the CSS that was, so the competition scratch score, was replaced with a playing conditions calculation. And the playing conditions calculation is calculated slightly differently. So whereas the CSS was just on the scores that were played in that competition and just including those players, the playing condition calculation takes in every score played on a golf course on a particular day, whether that be men, women, competition, general play, white tees, red tees, it doesn't matter. All scores are used in that calculation. And the system needs at least 8 return scores to be able to calculate a PCC. And for those 8 scores, the players have to have a handicap index of 36.0 or less to be included in that calculation. So you're sort of like you're only looking at your more consistent type golfers rather than people at an extreme. So that's the idea behind it. But basically what it does is it looks at not the actual playing conditions. So nobody actually goes out and goes, it's windy today. Oh, look, there's been 4 mil of rain. Nobody does any like measurements like that. What it does is it looks at the scoring patterns of the players that have played on that day and on that golf course. So it looks at what their expected score is, and then what the 2 parameters are. So what's a good day, what's a bad day for that player of that handicap playing that golf course, and then actually looks at their actual score. So if you imagine like a trumpet on a graph, if the top line's your worst score and the bottom line is your best potential score, and then you actually plot, depending on your handicap index, you actually then plot the score that you actually played or you actually scored. The system basically moves it up or down to get the majority of the people within that trumpet. Mm-hmm. In simple terms, that's how it works. Now, there's a lot more statistics and formula and algebra and all sorts that goes on in the background, and I'm not a mathematician, so I ain't going to try and explain how it all actually works. But that's the principle behind it. Now, what I will say is we have found, and we're looking at this, and we've spoke to the RNA about it, is that we're finding that the PCC is not moving as much as we would expect. Now, we knew that it was more conservative based on the old CSS, which was very volatile. We knew it was going to be more conservative, but we've got a few concerns that it might be too conservative and might not be moving enough. So that's been raised with the WHS. We've provided them with some score data so that they can have a look at it. And we've just basically got to just hold fire and just wait and see what comes out of their research and let them play with the numbers, and they'll come back and tell us. So we know that it's a concern. And I would imagine it's probably the fact that there's so many people played and maybe not everybody's played within what we expect them, the tolerances of what we expect for that particular day. So not really much more I can say, I don't think.
No, but again, it's just good to know that you know, like you say, the system's more conservative, and that potentially could be one of the main reasons why you didn't see, you know, why she saw such a change, or didn't see such a change, I say. So now we're going to move on to Marie. She says, I had knee replacement, should I say, in 2019, but did not play 2019 and only a few in 2020. My handicap index was calculated on scores from 2017 and 2018. As a result, I went up 1.4 in the first 3 competitions this year. It will be very difficult for me to reduce handicap with scores that are waiting to drop off. So basically, I think my question I've got here is there anything that Marie can do in this situation, or is it just literally a case of having to put in more cards and wait for those very sort of old scores to come off the system?
Yeah, I think if for any player that's looking at their handicap record and has got scores from 2018 or early 2019 in their handicap record in their last 20, my best piece of advice is go out there and put some scores in. 9 holes, if 9 holes is better, 18 holes, whatever you want to do, just put in more scores, because the more you can flush those scores through your record and get your 20 scores within the last sort of like 18 months, the more accurate your handicap index is going to be. So to just try and flush them through it if at all possible. But what I would also say is, if there is a real example where the handicap that you've got doesn't reflect your actual ability, and this could be up or down, go and speak to your handicap committee at your golf club. They'll know your personal circumstances. If you've had a knee operation and your handicap actually needs to be higher, then they can make adjustments to that to give you a little bit more stability when you go out and play and make you enjoy your golf again. The same the other way as well. If they know that actually 2 years ago you were really suffering and now there's been a change in circumstances, which mean you've got more movement and it's easier for you to play, then again, they can apply an adjustment. So put some more scores in would always be my first thing, because that will give you the most accurate handicap index for how you're playing right now. And then if that doesn't quite sit and it's not quite working out as you would expect, speak to your handicap committee and see if they're willing to do anything to help.
That's brilliant. And I hadn't thought about the fact that, just do 9 holes. And if you can get a few 9 holes in, if, let's say, you've had an operation and can't necessarily go do 18, that's a really good idea. Right, we have Linda. Linda said, when the World Handicap System was first implemented, I was awarded a handicap of 29.6. My Kongu handicap was 28.6. But I have just joined a much harder course with a higher slope rating, and I put in one qualifier before WHS, which was 27 points. So I was quite happy with my new handicap index. However, since then I have played a couple of qualifiers, neither of which were too good, but have now gone up to 31.3, and I feel quite deflated and have no incentive to put in another card. I don't see the sense in it, as I thought the whole idea of WHS was to give people more incentive to play, not less. So the question I've got is, have you had much negative feedback around the potential increase in handicaps? That's one of the questions, seems to be the side more of an increase rather than seeing loads of decreasing in handicaps. And how could it be possible to incentivize Linda to persevere in this case?
I think because we're working on an averaging system now rather than an incremental system, it is looking back at your actual ability. So it's looking at scores that you've returned as a player. So as much as we're all quite proud of our handicaps, if we actually look at our handicap records and we sort of like look and go, actually, how is my golf? What is the overall picture of my golf? That's what an averaging system does. It looks at what you actually score. So because it's taken the best scores, it's actually saying that's the right level that you're playing at, and that's what your handicap and your current ability is. But that shouldn't deter you from continuing to play, because the more scores you put in, the better that picture becomes of your handicap index. And I think certainly if you've moved to a new course, you need a little bit of time to get used to how to play that golf course. So just keep going, keep trying to put scores in, and always remember that if one of those scores, if it's a bad score, it's not likely to be in your best 8. If you know what your best 8 are and you know what scores have been included in your best 8 and you have a shocker, don't worry about it. It's not one of your best 8. It's not going to be used. Always just consider, okay, they're my best 8. If I can get within those best 8, my handicap's not going to change much. And that's what we're trying to get people to aim for. But putting in more scores and looking at, actually, is this better than my best 8 or is this worse than my best 8, rather than is this worse than where I am right now?
Okay, yep, that makes sense. We do have a question that's a bit similar from that point of view, and it's from Jane, and I will, hopefully everyone will be able to see the scores coming up, but I played in our spring meeting yesterday and I shot 87. This now counts as one of my 8 best scores in the last 20. However, when I look at the list of 20 scores, they read as follows, if you see on the screen now. So the question is, why is one of the 89s not counted instead of the 91? And our second part of the question that they had was, also, my England Golf app does not show the playing course conditions. Where can I find this?
So I'll pick up on the PCC calculation first. We have recently made a change to the app, which will now show you the score differential and the PCC calculation for each score. So on the England Golf app, the score differential will be on the tile, the very first tile where all your scores are. And if you click on the actual score and go into your scorecard, you'll see the PCC. So it goes against each round on the app now. You'll be able to see that. In terms of why is the 89 not counted when there is a 91, this then again comes down to the score differential. And probably one of the biggest misconceptions about WHS is that it's your 8 best gross scores. And it's not. We don't look at the gross score. We look at the score differential. And the reason we use the score differential is because it takes into consideration the course that you've played, so the course rating of that golf course. It takes into consideration the slope rating of the golf course you've played and any playing conditions adjustment. So what I would say is, in Jane's example, is that 91 is deemed to be a better score than the 89 because potentially it was played on maybe a harder golf course. So it may be a golf course with a higher course rating. So if the course rating for that golf course was 76 and she scored 91, but then the 89 was scored on a course that was rated at 70, you can see how there is a difference. So it's not necessarily your gross score. You need to look at your score differentials, and it's your best 8 score differentials that we use, not gross scores.
I think a lot of people probably don't understand that or have not realised that point actually, because it's a very, very good point there. So just sort of to finish off, and obviously I'd like to throw a nice massive clanger in right at the end, just to keep you on your toes. Again, a few weeks ago, there was quite a lot of discussion on social media about course ratings for women in particular, who would like to play off the yellow or white tees. Now, is this something that's in progress, or is there a way a club can apply to have these ratings done for each tee for women in particular? And if so, do you see a time when we can just have club competitions? The second part, we have club competitions where it's just everyone can play off whichever tee they want to. So obviously that'd be men playing off the red tees, the women playing off the whites. Or is that going to happen eventually? And also about this system of trying to make the course ratings for women off the other tees, not just the red tees.
Yeah, I'll pick the second bit up first. So we have a lot of golf clubs already that play mixed competitions, and they're men and women playing off different tees. It could even be men playing just a men's competition being played off different tees, where players choose a tee subject to their ability and what they feel more comfortable with. We have a number of mixed competitions where they play off, men and women play in the same field. Obviously, with the England Golf Under-18s Championship this week, next week, we're doing it obviously for the first time as a national tournament. So yeah, it is possible. And it's all done based on the course rating. So we make adjustments to the players' score based on the tee that they are using like a mixed calculation. So it is possible and it can be done, and it is being done. So that's nothing really new. Clubs are starting to do it. In terms of ratings for ladies, what we do as England Golf is we have a recommendation that courses over 6,100 yards shouldn't be rated for ladies as the norm. So if you've got a yellow tee that's 5,900 yards, not a problem. Feel free to ask your county union association if it can be rated for ladies. If it's over 6'1", we just want a golf club to really understand why we are not recommending that for ladies. And it comes down to the difficulty that golf course then poses to golfers. So if you have a course that's over 6,100 yards for ladies, you're going to tend to find that the course rating is around about 75, 76-ish in terms of the course rating value, which means even for a scratch golfer, that's quite difficult. If you then play in that golf course and it's a par 72, for example, it's very difficult because the par is expecting them to play 4 under what the actual course rating value is. So it's just a difficult golf course. And that's a difficulty because the ball is landing in areas where you might be attacked, like you might get bunkers, or there might be water hazards or rough. There's things that are going to impact the playing of that golf course. If it's difficult for the scratch golfer, it's going to be even harder for the higher handicap, the bogey golfer, and any players that are higher. So unless you've got a large number of elite players that are going to play this golf course that's longer than 6-1, you're not really going to be encouraging your higher handicappers to go and play. So if you've got a golf course that's 6,100 yards, it's got a course rating of 76, it might have a slope rating of 155, you're not going to want anybody probably higher than 8 or 9 handicap stepping onto that tee, because first of all, they're never going to get anywhere near playing to their handicap, which is going to be demoralizing. There may be situations on the golf course where they're not going to be able to make carries. So they're not going to be able to reach the fairway because we've pushed the tees further back. It's just going to make the golf course an even bigger challenge. And what we don't want to do is it become the norm to say everybody plays off the whites when you've got players that just cannot get the ball to the fairway. That's even more demoralizing. And unfortunately, the majority of our golfers are not elite golfers. They are at that higher end. So for most golf clubs, there's no need to have a white tee rated. If your yellow tee is less than 6-1, then great, it's an opportunity for development. But it's just understanding that concern. There's also the element that there was a recent article in one of the US golf magazines and talked about the average length on the LPGA Tour. And they were saying that I think at the moment it's about 6'6", 6'7" is their average yardage. But actually all the players want it to be around 6'4", because around 6'4" gives them that element of risk and reward where they can hit a mid-iron into a par 5 or into a par 4. They're not hitting driver rescue into par 4s, where if it's 6-7, that's what they're hitting. And if we want to promote the women's game, we want to see women's golf being played well. You don't necessarily need to be playing this off a long golf course. You want to start seeing skill. You want to see accuracy. You want to see people having birdies and having putts for eagle. If you lengthen the golf course to 6,700 yards, we're going to see less and less of those. So I always look at what they're doing on the tour. They're saying they need to play shorter golf courses. And if the tour are saying that and they are the best of the best, then we should be trying to encourage people to think about that as well. But I totally agree that we need to be giving opportunities to players to play along a golf course. So if you've got a yellow tee that's under 6'1", that's where I would aim your focus on, rather than saying we want every tee rated for every gender, because the chances are nobody's ever going to play that black tee on the Hodgkin as a female. It's not going to happen. We struggle when we play as staff and we play off the yellow tee sometimes when we play with the guys, and we've got some very good golfers. So it's a case of it's balance. It's balance and enjoyment and how we want the women's game to be perceived against what is the right thing to do. Should we be encouraging those ratings? But if somebody's got a really good, clear picture of why that course should be rated, and they can articulate that to us and they can show us what their plans are, we'll always take it into consideration. We never say no. We're just saying we don't recommend it. But if you want to go higher than that, you need to approach us and give us a justification for it, and we'll make a decision.
That's brilliant. I think that definitely answers the question. And I think that's really interesting about the LPGA reference as well, because, as you say, promoting women's golf, we don't want to be just seeing lots and lots of bogeys or not very sort of artistic shots towards the green. So it's really important.
If you look at any of the women's sport, the sports that have been successful at developing the women's brand of a sport are the ones that have actually gone, okay, what can we do to make the game more accessible and more enjoyable, whether it be to watch or... And there's modifications that we can make to actually say we don't need to play the game like the men's tour do. We don't need to all suddenly become Bryson DeChambeau and be able to hit the ball that far. what we need to be able to do is use what we've got and actually promote it in the right way. And I think we can do a lot more of that. And I think, like I said, if the LPGA Tour and the players are saying, look guys, we would rather play a shorter golf course and have a bit more fun out there, that's got to look better on TV. That's got to look better when you're actually getting winning scores on the ladies tour of like 26 under, like we do on the men's tour. It's got to sort of like make people go, actually, these girls can play golf. And we all know they can, but it just proves that we can do it.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Gemma. I really appreciate your time today.
No problem. Thank you very much.